Yo yo yo, what's up to my Dutch homie Mekkah?
Sup?
I am Don1, and you are watching Chapter 11 of a Fire Emblem 5 Paragon Mode 0% Gross playthrough. If I could pick two adjectives to describe this chapter, they would be weird and annoying, although every chapter in the low turn count playthrough is at least a little weird and a little annoying, but this one especially so. It's weird because there's a couple of events I have to trigger for successful completion of this map, especially in the context of a triple S rank playthrough for the purpose of recruiting a new unit. And it's irksome because of the overall map layout. There are indoor sections, outdoor sections, there are one tile wide corridors that we have to navigate through, and finally, near the starting point, there's 3 consecutive forest tiles that every single one of our units, except for Karen, is substantially impeded by. And in fact, most of Leaf's army is not going to be able to get past this little forest on turn 1. But not to worry, because we have the warp staff and we're not afraid to use it. It looks like we're preparing to warp Dagdar, who is a big, strong, burly unit capable of killing bosses. And you'd expect that he'd be carrying Leaf, because it'd be a 2-for-1 warp in that case, but it seems like you picked up the wrong person.
I'd like to nominate Dagdar for Worst Dad of the Year, because the situation in which he is putting Tanya, his very own daughter, even as a single dad, is just not acceptable. He is dumping her in the middle of a room full of angry armor knights, mages, and a bishop. Thankfully, Tanya is unequipped, so the worst that's going to happen to her is she just gets captured by this armor knight, and she will still be giving him support bonuses, which will be very helpful for both his hit and his avoid. And Dagdar has been known to be invincible, but this enemy phase makes him look like a mortal. The armor knights are no problem, but the bishop hits on his lower magic stat rather than his ridiculous defense stat. And to make matters even worse, he is going to trigger charge while not being able to counter. And this is the drawback that makes charge look kind of bad to some players, because Dagdar is going to end up facing 2 hits rather than 1. And that's obviously a big problem when you actually end up dying eventually if you get hit by 2 thunders from this bishop. But even with charge activating at this inopportune moment, Dagdar is still the best person for the job.
So the reason why we didn't have Leaf go with Dagdar to the throne room for a very quick warp skip is because in order to recruit one of the units in this map, we have to have Leaf move towards the centered room, that center rectangular space that you see guarded by an enemy paladin. That paladin is a guy with a face. His name is Fred. He was actually one of the units that was supposed to appear in the previous chapter, but didn't because we were too quick. Fred is kind of a plot important character. He is a subordinate to another unit named Olwen, and Olwen has a bit of a feud with the boss of this chapter, whose name is Kempf. Kempf is kind of an asshole, and as punishment for Olwen being disobedient to him, he decides to throw Olwen in jail and then put Fred in this little room to lure Leaf in. Now, when Leaf walks into that room, a whole bunch of things occur. Basically, Leaf gets locked in there along with Fred, and a bunch of enemies appear that are going to try to kill him. Essentially, Fred's there because the point of the trap is that no one comes out alive, including Fred. So basically, the boss was trying to send Fred to his death. But when Leaf goes into that room, Fred becomes a green unit, and that allows him to be recruited in the next chapter.
Safi needs to repair her broken warp staff, but in order to do that, she needs someone else to hold onto it for some reason, because she can't just lay it on the ground, so she gives it to Ronan, and then uses her personal hammer and staff to get it back to full uses, so we can use it again next chapter if you want to. Dagdar decides to live dangerously and capture this bishop, maybe revenge for Tanya, or maybe he just wants the physics staff that he is holding. The armor knights that are in the room with Fred behave kind of strangely. Their AI is programmed to just move around randomly. We want as many of them to end up in the corridor where Orson is making quick work of them, because the more he gets out of the way, the less of them we have to deal with later.
These armor knights have substantial potential to ruin our strategy and force a reset because their random movements in the first 2 turns. The ones that cannot suicide themselves on Orson have the potential to still wander into that 1 tile wide corridor that Leaf's going to have to walk through on the subsequent player phase. Now, it's okay if one of them blocks away because Orson is in the best position to pick up the kill on the next player phase, but if any more than one of them gets in the way, then we have to reset because we don't really have anyone else who is positioned to reliably kill the second armor knight. Now, while we still have the time, it's probably good to talk about one of the other side objectives in this map that we're not going to fulfill because we're mostly concerned with turning Fred green. You see a chest in the top left hand corner of the map. That chest contains the only obtainable torch staff in the game. Its effect in this game is the exact same as a normal torch, it's just that it gives experience, weapon experience to the user. It comes at a pretty convenient time because the next 3 chapters are all Fog of War chapters. It's a pretty low weapon rank, so certain units such as Asphalt might be able to spam it for the weapon experience, but we can do without it, so we're not going to miss it that much.
Leif walks into the room with Fred, and Kempf springs his trap card. It's called the Portcullis attack, and Leif radios Safi to get him out of there because it's looking really dangerous. A bunch of doors appear that will block the exit both ways, and there's also 2 ballista that appear and threaten him. But now that Leif is out of there, we actually have to worry about what happens to Fred, who just turned green and is now in range of a bunch of armor knights and ballista. If you think you're being clever in this map by trying to block the doors by standing on them, like the way you block reinforcements from appearing, you can't do that. The game will make the doors appear anyway, and they will push the characters out of the way.
One thing I feel that FE5 is excellent at is using mechanics and events to convey not only plot but also character personalities. For example, in his use of the Portcullis trap, we can see how much of a coward Kempf is by his willingness to use Fred as bait. This is in contrast to Dagdar, who is such a badass that not only is he low on HP, but he decides to engage Kempf in one-on-one combat with a hostage in hand, and somehow this causes Kempf to flee. This is purely intentional. Kempf is hard-coded to leave the map, the enemy phase, after he is attacked, even if he sustains no damage. And it's impossible to kill him in this chapter because any fatal blow he will dodge automatically, kind of like how Ava was invincible in the first 4 chapters of the game.
Fred has a pretty precarious enemy phase here. He has to face 4 armor knights because he's completely surrounded, including the one that's above him between the door and himself. That usually doesn't happen. These ballistas will always deal almost half of his HP, and they could have actually killed him, but one of them decided to go for Fergus, who managed to distract Ballista by holding a hostage to lower his own defense. Asphalt is also there to distract the Ballista, but that didn't work this time. Fred is pretty bulky, and he's also pretty dodgy, so he doesn't always have this much trouble surviving. And if it takes multiple turns, then he also can use a vulnerary to get back to full HP.
Fred's looking like a bit of a chump right now because he's getting gangbanged by 4 armor knights, and he's trapped in a room that he can't escape because there are 3 doors blocking his way. But if you were to unlock those 3 doors, he will attempt to escape the map to the south. I guess he doesn't want to quite become a blue unit yet. He has to think about it for a moment before he becomes an ally in the next chapter. Until then, Safi's going to do one final warp on Leif to end this map in 4 turns. She did a lot of staff work in this chapter with some high-powered staves, so as a result she's accumulated a lot of fatigue, way more than her HP, so that's the reason why we got the stamina drink in an earlier chapter, so we can use her in the next one. Anyway, that's chapter 11, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.